How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode. I'm the ChainBaker, and today I've got some whole grain spelt flour rolls for you. They're healthy, they're tasty, and you really don't want to miss this one. So let's go to the kitchen and have a closer look. This is my first bread using spelt flour ever, and what a treat. It came out perfect. Definitely the healthiest roll to come out of my oven. Whole grain spelt, plenty of seeds, and we also use a pre-ferment here, and the result speaks for itself. Just look at that texture. It's so beautifully soft. And it will stay soft even on the next day and the day after. And you can make awesome sandwiches, just like this one here. And if you've never used spelt flour before, this will be the perfect introduction to it. So let's get right to it and see what we'll need. The star of the show is the whole grain spelt flour, but we'll also use some white wheat flour. We'll also need some yeast, salt, some honey for flavor and color, and I've got some linseeds and pine nuts, but you can use any seeds you like. And of course we'll also need some water. And if you want to cover your rolls with some seeds, then you'll need a glaze. I'll use a beaten egg, but there are dozens of other options. Check out my glaze comparison video for more. As for the equipment, we'll need a tray with some non-stick paper, a bowl for mixing, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, and a brush for the egg glaze. And as I mentioned, this dough is made with a pre-ferment, so that's the first thing we'll do. Pre-ferment will give this dough extra flavor, a more sturdy texture, and it'll make it stay fresher for longer. And if you want to learn more about pre-ferments, check out the Principles of Baking playlist on my channel. This particular pre-ferment is special because we are going to add the seeds to it. So it's basically a pre-ferment and a soaker combo. And if you want to learn more about soakers, also check out the Principles of Baking playlist. Soaking the seeds makes the bread retain more water. It'll make it stay moister for longer. So in short, the seeded pre-ferment is part of the total water, a tiny pinch of yeast, the seeds, and all of the white wheat flour. You want to mix this until there's no more dry flour left. Now we can cover it up and leave it to ferment. It'll take around 10 to 14 hours, so you can make this in the evening and have it ready by the morning. Or you can make it before you go to work, and it'll be ready by the time you come back. And if for any reason you're not ready to use your pre-ferment by the time it is ready, you can pop it in the fridge to slow down the fermentation, then use it later. But be sure to adjust the water temperature of the dough, so it doesn't turn out too cool, or leave the pre-ferment out to come up to room temperature. And speaking of temperature, this time I'm going to be using slightly warmer water than normally. My kitchen's quite cool today, and this dough requires the stretch and fold kneading method, which does not warm up the dough that much. So the water that I'm using is almost room temperature. So to make the final dough, grab a large bowl, add the remaining water, the salt, the yeast and honey, and then give it a quick mix. You want to dissolve the salt and hydrate the yeast. And no, combining the yeast and the salt is not going to harm the yeast. Perhaps it would, if you let them sit together for an unreasonably long time. But we don't do silly things like that. We mix our ingredients right away. So add the pre-ferment and the spelt flour and mix this together until there's no more dry flour left. To help the spelt flour absorb the water and make our life easier come kneading time, we're going to leave this dough to rest for 15 minutes. So tip it out on the table and walk away. When it comes to kneading, to make your life easier from the get-go, wet your hands and your scraper. Now pick the dough up by one side, turn it 90 degrees, stretch it against the table and fold it over forwards. And that's how you perform a stretch and fold. It's the best hand kneading method for wet and sticky dough like this. It should not stick to the table too much, but if it does, just scrape it all up and continue. It'll become less and less sticky and more cohesive as you keep going. In total, the kneading process from start to finish should not take more than 10 minutes. After you have finished kneading it, remember to wet your hands when handling dough like this. Water prevents the dough from sticking to your hands and makes it easier to handle. Look how nice and smooth that is, it's perfect. We can place it in a bowl now and take its temperature, around 24 to 25 degrees Celsius, just about right for this, which is about 75 to 77 Fahrenheit. Now we can cover it up, leave it to ferment for 1 hour. Now dough made with spelt flour is extra stretchy and less elastic than wheat flour dough. So folding it halfway through bulk fermentation is extremely important to build some tension into the dough. Now dust it with flour and pop it out on the table with the smooth side down. Now stretch it out and fold the edge over the middle, going around in a circle until you reach point where you started. And you see how loose it is. Once you have gone all the way around, flip it smooth side up again and then tighten it against the table. If it's too sticky for you, then dust your hands with flour. It is certainly a sticky dough. Whenever you're handling dough like this, remember, quick hands and a light touch. Those will make your job a lot easier. Now pop it back into the bowl and ferment it for another hour. Now it should really start puffing up. That is the pre-ferment working, and also the fact that we are using whole grain flour, which makes the yeast more active. After the second hour of fermentation, we can divide the dough, and I always suggest weighing it. You want your balls to be the same size, right? You can use generous dusting of flour, because this dough is still sticky. Weigh it and then divide it into 8 equal pieces. If you want smaller rolls, you can divide the dough into 10 or 12 pieces. It's up to you. You could even shape this into a loaf and bake it in a tin. If you're making rolls after dividing, we need to pre-shape. Again, use a bit of flour, take a piece of dough, make sure the smooth side is pointing down, then fold the edge over the middle, going around in a circle until you reach point where you started. Then flip it smooth side up again and tighten it against the table. This pre-shaping step will ensure that all the dough balls are nice and uniform. And the reason why it's called pre-shaping, because we still need to do the final shaping after this. So once again, generous dusting of flour, cover your dough balls up, leave them to rest for 15 minutes. The resting step relaxes the gluten, makes them easier to shape. And the final shaping is quite like the pre-shaping. Flip the dough ball smooth side down again, flatten it out, fold the edge over the middle, going around in a circle until you reach point where you started. Flip it smooth side up again, tighten it against the table, and that's your dough ball done. And if the first one didn't come out right, well, you got 7 more to practice on. Treat each baking session as a lesson. I learn something new every time I bake something, even if it's the same thing over and over again. Like here, if you feel that your hand is sticking to the dough, rub it against the table in the flour, and it becomes instantly non-stick. Well, for a while anyway. This is definitely one of the more messy recipes, so let's clean down. Place your dough balls on a non-stick paper lined tray and space them out evenly. They will expand quite a lot as they're fermenting and baking, and since the spelt dough is relatively weak, they will expand more sideways instead of rising upwards. Once again, good dusting of flour won't hurt. Now cover the dough balls loosely, and we can leave them for the final proof, which should take just about an hour. Of course, it will depend on the temperature of your kitchen. Now during final fermentation, preheat your oven, 160 degrees Celsius, fan on, that's 320 Fahrenheit. And once you look at these beauties, they have puffed up so well. If yours need longer, leave them for longer. Bake the bread when the bread's ready, not when the timer's up. And of course, if they are fermenting rapidly, cut the fermentation time down. But whatever happens, before baking, you need to gently brush them with the egg glaze or any glaze that you choose. You can also leave them plain if you want. If you do use a glaze, don't poke your rolls, as you don't want to distort them or deflate them. There's never a reason to rush the baking process. Okay, so after the glaze come the seeds, and you can use any seeds that you like, or not use any seeds at all. It is your bread roll after all, you can do whatever you want with it. I decided to use more linseeds, and I didn't hold back. There's about twice as much linseeds on the dough than inside the dough. To make the seeds stick better, pat them down lightly with the palm of your hand. They do look pretty appealing with the seeds on, right? Even before baking. So let's pop these bad boys in the oven. They'll take around 25 minutes. And if they're not baking evenly, you can turn the tray around halfway through the bake. Don't expect them to rise a lot in the oven. They already reached their full potential during fermentation. Just bake them until they're beautifully golden brown all over, and they'll be ready. And don't they look beautiful? I can't wait to tuck in. But first we should leave them to cool down a little bit. I know it's nice to tuck into a warm roll, but it's not quite done yet. The inside may be a bit gummy if you eat it too soon, and you will only be able to taste the full flavor of those rolls once they have cooled down to room temperature. Remember that even the worst piece of bread will taste nice whilst it's still warm, but only good bread will taste nice once it's cooled down. And this right here is certainly good bread, and a great addition to the new playlist I made, specifically for whole grain and multigrain breads, so check it out. So what do you think of this recipe? Have you ever used spelt flour before? Let me know down in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this one, click over here, subscribe to the channel, click right here. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.